The donor heart should have been inside my operating room, packed in ice and racing against the clock. But all I saw was an empty transport cooler and a silence so sharp it felt surgical. A decorated war general lay open under anesthesia, while 3 administrators argued with their eyes, and nobody said the one sentence that mattered. We had lost the only heart that could keep him alive. Hours earlier. The night began with rain needling the windows, and the smell of antiseptic fighting a losing battle against burnt coffee and damp wool. I had been on my feet long enough for my lower back to feel welded into a permanent bend, the stethoscope on my neck heavier than it had any right to be. Then the doors opened, and in came a man who didn't need an introduction. Not because of the insignia on the retired military aide's jacket, but because the room itself changed shape around him. Everyone stood straighter. Everyone spoke softer. Even the gurney wheels seemed to squeak more carefully. His name, in my version of this story, was General Nathaniel Cross, 68. Broad-shouldered even under a hospital blanket, with the kind of face that looked carved by command and bad weather. Heart failure had hollowed him out faster than pride could hide it. His skin had that grayish tint I had learned to respect, the color that told me a body was burning through its last polite lies. He still tried to sit up when I introduced myself, as if he owed the room his posture. I put a hand on his shoulder and felt him tremble, not from fear, but from the effort of remaining who he had always been. His daughter, Claire, stood beside him in a navy coat still wet at the cuffs, her hands wrapped so tightly around her phone that her knuckles had gone white. She watched every monitor change, as if she could will numbers upward by refusing to blink. When I asked when he had last been comfortable, she gave me the kind of answer only exhausted families give. Before all this, there was no self-pity in her voice. Only the dryness of someone who had spent too many nights sleeping in waiting rooms and learning the vocabulary of hope in smaller and smaller doses. I had heard that tone before. It always made me more careful. The transplant team had already been mobilized before he arrived from the cardiac step-down unit. There was a donor heart, they told us. A rare match cleared after a brutal week of near misses and false alarms. In a hospital like ours, miracles did not arrive with trumpets. They arrived in refrigerated containers, in signatures in timing sheets, in people speaking too quickly into headsets while pretending to be calm. I remember seeing Dr. Lena Morris, our cardiothoracic surgeon, scrubbing in with her jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. She was brilliant, tireless, and not built for small mistakes. That mattered more than I knew. I went upstairs to the transplant floor after stabilizing an elderly stroke patient in the and the air changed the moment the elevator doors opened. It was quieter there, but not peaceful. Quiet in hospitals can be more frightening than noise. It means something important is being prepared, hidden, or lost. Outside operating room 7, a young lab technician named Tessa Vale stood holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield. She had neat hair, pale lips, and the stunned expression of someone who had just seen reality shift a few inches and was praying nobody else had noticed. "Is everything ready?" I asked, and she answered a little too fast. Almost. One word, one crack in the voice, and I felt my stomach tighten. Down the corridor, 2 administrators from hospital leadership were speaking in the low, polished tones people use when they want panic to sound strategic. I caught fragments as I passed them. Chain of custody, located. No external report, yet. Those are not phrases that belong near an operating room waiting for a heart. I stopped walking. Tessa looked at me, then at the floor. In that tiny movement, I saw it before anyone said it aloud. By the time General Cross was sedated and prepped, the fluorescent lights above the OR had turned his skin waxen and unreal, as if life had already taken half a step backward. The transport cooler sat near the stainless steel table, lid open, lined with melting ice packs and absinthe. Dr. Morris stared into it with both gloved hands braced on the counter. Nobody explained anything, not at first. Machines hummed. A suction canister clicked. Rain tapped the far window like impatient fingers. Then Tessa whispered the sentence that split the night open. The donor heart isn't in the lab. And it isn't here. I have seen gunshot wounds, collapsed lungs, children coding in their mother's arms. But there are few things more terrifying than a room full of experts realizing the problem is no longer medicine. The problem had become truth. General Cross lay anesthetized beneath the surgical lights, chest marked and ready, his life suspended on the promise that a heart was coming. But promises do not pump blood. Around him, the room contracted into sharp movements and clipped whispers. One nurse rechecked the cooler, as if a missing organ might appear if she looked with enough devotion. It did not. Dr. Morris ripped off one glove, then the other, snapping latex into the trash with the violence of a person trying not to scream. She demanded a timeline, and what came back was a mess of half-complete handoffs, mislabeled transport steps, and a courier record that ended in a blank signature line. I watched her eyes move from face to face, measuring competence, fear, and cowardice. There is a specific silence that follows institutional failure. It is never empty. It is crowded with calculations. Who knew? Who signed? Who can be blamed? Who can still be sacrificed? Outside the OR, Claire Cross was being told there had been an unexpected delay. She did not buy it for a second. Families can smell dishonesty faster than blood. When she saw me come through the doors, she stood so suddenly her chair skidded backward across the polished floor. "What's happening to my father?" she asked. Behind her, a Secret Service liaison and two military aides hovered near the wall, pretending to respect medical space, while radiating federal pressure into every corner. I chose my words carefully, and I hated every one of them for not being enough. At that point, the chief operations officer, Martin Bell, arrived in a charcoal suit that still held the dry warmth of an office far away from suffering. He did not look at the patient first. He looked at the staff. That told me all I needed to know. His voice stayed level, almost genial when he suggested we continue searching internally and avoid premature escalation. Premature. As if honesty had a schedule. As if a man's chest waiting to be opened was just another inconvenience for risk management. I remember feeling the back of my neck go hot, the way it does right before anger becomes dangerous. Then came the worst part, the workaround. Someone, maybe Bell, maybe one of the transplant coordinators, too frightened to attach their name to it, proposed initiating emergency outreach for another possible donor source. They said it like a solution instead of a fantasy. The compatible heart we had was rare enough to feel biblical. Another one would not appear because we wished harder. Tessa, standing near the hallway computer, whispered that the original sample logs didn't match the transport barcode. Her voice shook so badly she could barely finish the sentence. No one thanked her. No one wanted a witness. They wanted a miracle or a scapegoat. Inside the Rega, called out dropping pressures, and reminded us that time under sedation was not infinite. General Cross's body, even before incision, was paying for our delay. Sweat had gathered near his temples despite the cold air. The monitor traced his failing rhythm in green peaks that looked too fragile for a man who had once commanded battalions. I stepped closer, laid two fingers against his wrist out of habit, and felt a pulse trying to remain loyal. "We stop now and tell them," I said. Dr. Morris met my eyes. She wanted to agree. Bell wanted silence. The pressure changed shape when the president's office was mentioned. Not openly, but in those sideways references powerful people use to remind everyone what is at stake without contaminating themselves with specifics. General Cross was a friend of the current president, a public figure, a symbol easy for cameras and headlines. But lying to preserve optics in a hospital is like covering a hemorrhage with a bedsheet. It changes what people see, not what is happening underneath. Tessa took one step forward, then stopped. I could almost hear the hinges of her future creak as she decided whether to protect her badge or the man on the table. The central question that night was not whether we could save General Cross with a new procedure or some last-minute brilliance. Medicine would have loved that kind of problem. It was uglier than that. The question was whether we were willing to tell the truth, while there was still enough time for the truth to matter. If we admitted the donor heart had been lost somewhere between custody points, the surgery would halt, the family would know, regulators would descend, and careers would split open. If we hid it, we might buy an hour of false hope and bury ourselves under something far worse. Martin Bell framed the argument in the language administrators prefer when they want immorality to sound mature. He talked about preventing chaos, confirming facts, preserving patient confidence, avoiding unnecessary distress. Every phrase landed with the softness of a pillow and the weight of a brick. I had been in hospitals long enough to know that bureaucratic cruelty rarely raises its voice. It speaks calmly, carries a tablet, and calls itself responsible. Across from him, Dr. Morris stood with bloodless hands and wet eyes, still scrubbed, still ready, looking like a pilot told to keep smiling after learning the runway had disappeared. Tessa finally brought me the chain of custody printout. Her fingertips were cold enough to make the paper shake. The donor organ had arrived on campus. That much was certain. But a mislabeled transfer and a duplicate identifier had sent the container to an adjacent pathology intake corridor before it vanished into a system designed to track specimens, not one irreplaceable human heart, one digit wrong, one routine assumption, one invisible person clicking through a screen to quickly near the end of a shift. Disasters in hospitals are rarely theatrical at birth. They begin as ordinary fatigue wearing an ID badge. She told me, in a voice barely louder than fabric moving, that she had noticed the discrepancy 22 minutes earlier. She had told her immediate supervisor. He had told her to wait until they could confirm the exposure risk before documenting it formally. In plain language, he had asked her to sit on the truth while a transplant patient lay anesthetized down the hall. Her eyes filled, but she never lost the discipline to keep speaking clearly. "If I file it now," she said, "they'll say I caused the delay." I looked at her and saw every young clinician who had been taught that obedience was safer than honesty. Then there was Claire. She had become the moral clock of the building without knowing it. Each time I stepped into the waiting area, she searched my face before I spoke, reading what I wished I could hide. She told me her father had survived to combat tours, 3 surgeries, and the kind of grief that turns men inward for decades. He can handle bad news, she said. What he never tolerated was being lied to. It landed harder than any accusation. Some families ask for hope, others ask for truth. The second kind leaves you fewer places to hide. I stood at the glass panel outside the OR and watched my own reflection overlap with General Cross's still body. My face looked older there, cut in half by surgical light. I remembered a patient from 15 years earlier, a teenager whose internal bleeding we recognized too late because everyone had been too polite to challenge the first confident voice in the room. That boy's mother had thanked us through tears, and I have never forgiven myself for accepting gratitude I had not earned. Hospitals remember through people, not walls. My memory pressed against my ribs like a fist. So I made the choice that split the night in two. I told Tessa to file the incident immediately, with time stamps, names, and every discrepancy intact. I told Dr. Morris to stand down the operation until the family heard the truth. And I told Bell that if leadership intended to keep this hidden, they would have to do it without my silence. He stared at me the way men do when they are unused to hearing no from someone in wrinkled scrubs. Behind us, monitors kept beeping, rain kept tapping the dark windows, and the whole hospital seemed to wait to see which would break first: policy, pride, or a human heart already too weak to wait. I was the one who told Claire. Some burdens should not be delegated, and some truths become more shameful with every hand they pass through. We stood in a consultation room where the overhead light buzzed faintly, and the coffee on the side table had formed a skin from sitting too long. I told her the donor heart had been misplaced inside the hospital's system, that the transplant could not proceed safely, and that her father was still under anesthesia while we stabilized him and determined the next step. For a second she did not react, then her face emptied in a way I will never forget. She did not scream. That would have been easier for everyone. Instead, she sat down very slowly, as if her bones had been replaced by glass, and asked me to repeat it. Vriwarji. People do that when reality arrives malformed. They hope hearing it again will force the world back into a recognizable shape. When I finished, she pressed her fist against her mouth and nodded once, twice, not in acceptance, but in discipline. She had inherited her father's refusal to collapse in public. "Did someone lie to us?" she asked. I should have said no more than necessary. Instead, I answered honestly. That was when the night became uncontainable. Claire demanded to see the surgical team. Bell tried to intercept, speaking about procedures and ongoing review, but grief stripped the varnish off his language. She cut through him with one sentence. "My father fought in wars with clearer rules than this building." Meanwhile, inside der crossed velalat, under anesthesia. His blood pressure sagged, his rhythm frayed, and the anesthesiologist called for immediate reversal and transfer to intensive cardiac support. The room moved fast then, because biology does not pause for reputational strategy. We were no longer deciding what to say. We were deciding whether he would survive the delay. Dr. Morris stepped back into command with the brutal focus of someone who had chosen the patient over the institution and accepted the cost. I saw her lean over the drapes, eyes fixed, hands steady again. Vasopressors were adjusted, ventilator settings changed. Orders flew in short, clean bursts. I moved to the bedside opposite her and helped guide the controlled retreat from a surgery that had never truly begun. There is a special kind of heartbreak in undoing preparation for a life-saving operation. Tape peeled from skin. Instruments went unused. Sterile ambition died by inches. All the while, the monitor screamed its green little warnings into the cold air. Then Tessa did the bravest thing of the night. She sent the formal incident report not only to her supervisor, but to compliance, transplant oversight, and hospital legal. Attaching the transport records before anyone could edit the trail, she knew exactly what it might do to her future. I saw her after she pressed send. Her face had gone pale, but her shoulders were straighter than before. Fear can hollow a person out, but truth sometimes fills the same space. Bell noticed what she had done almost immediately. His expression changed from control to calculation to anger so quickly it made him look briefly honest. We got General Cross out of the OR alive, though barely. The IQ room was dim except for monitor glow and the red pulse of a transport pump. Claire stood at the doorway when we rolled him in, one hand at her throat, tears finally slipping free without permission. She touched his blanket, not his skin, as if even that small distance might keep him safe from our mistakes. I told her he was stable for the moment, but no one in medicine should use that word lightly. Stable is often just another way of saying not gone yet. The final turn came 4 to 3 minutes later, when a pathology resident traced the mislabeled transfer to a cold storage unit on the wrong floor. The donor heart had not been destroyed. It had been delayed, misrouted, and kept outside transplant sequence long enough to make its viability uncertain. That news hit the team like oxygen and guilt at the same time. Dr. Morris looked at the retrieval time, then at the preservation window, and made the call only a surgeon can make. We had one last narrow chance. And if we took it, there would be no room left for error, excuses, or mercy. When they wheeled General Cross back toward the OR, the hallway seemed narrower, as if the building itself were ashamed to make us work inside it. The donor heart arrived in fresh containment under the eyes of two nurses, a surgical fellow and me, as though sheer witness could redeem what process had failed to protect. I remember staring at the cooler until my eyes burned, not because I doubted it was there, but because I no longer trusted relief. After enough years in emergency medicine, hope begins to feel less like light and more like a door that may lock behind you without warning. The second preparation was quieter. No one wasted motion. No one offered reassurance they had not earned. Dr. Morris held the organ with the reverence people usually reserve for infants or relics. And for a moment the whole room bowed around that fragile muscle and all the time it carried inside it. I stood near the head of the table while anesthesia settled General Cross back into the edge between life and oblivion. The smell of sterilized plastic, iodine, and chilled air coated the back of my throat. Somewhere beyond the sealed doors, Claire waited with nothing to do but trust us again. The operation stretched like a held breath. Surgeons measure time differently from families and differently from doctors like me. In the OR, time becomes mechanical. Clamps, sutures, flows, pressures, response. In the waiting room, it becomes emotional. Footsteps, coffee cups, glances at closed doors, every minute a rumor. I moved between those worlds all night. Each time I crossed them, I felt like a translator with inadequate language. Claire asked few questions after that. The deeper the pain, the fewer words people can afford. But every time she looked up, I understood the one question still burning behind her eyes. Was truth enough, if it came this late? Near dawn, with the storm finally thinning outside, the new heart took. Not dramatically, not with cinematic certainty. It began with small signs. The kind lay people would miss and clinicians learned to love. Pressure improving, color changing, rhythm organizing itself into something that resembled a future. Dr. Morris did not celebrate. She simply exhaled through her nose. Long Stroud then coming as if grudged the room. I felt my own knees weaken in that quiet way. Exhaustion and relief sometimes arrived together. We had not erased the failure. We had merely pulled a life back across it. When I told Claire the transplant had succeeded, she closed her eyes before she cried, and I understood that she had been holding herself upright through discipline alone. She did not hug me. She did not thank the hospital. She whispered, "Tell the one who told the truth I won't forget." I knew she meant Tessa as much as me, maybe more. Institutions like to celebrate heroics in surgery because they photograph, well, they are less comfortable with the kind that begins in a hallway, with a trembling hand hovering over a report nobody powerful once filed, but that night belonged to both kinds. By morning, compliance officers were in the building. Bell had vanished into a sequence of private calls, and rumors were already moving through the staff lounges in broken, hungry fragments. Tessa sat alone near the vending machines with untouched crackers in her lap. I sat beside her for a minute without speaking. Sometimes language only bruises the air. She asked me if she had done the right thing. I looked at the grooves the elastic cap had left on her forehead and thought of General Cross sleeping in intensive care with someone else's heart beating under his ribs. "Yes," I said, "and you may still pay for it. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below." I have worked enough years in emergency medicine to know that survival is not the same as innocence. General Cross lived. His daughter got more time. A new heart found its rhythm in his chest before dawn. On paper, those facts look like victory. But hospitals are not made only of outcomes. They are made of choices, omissions, delays, and the private bargains people make with their own conscience when no cameras are on and no family is listening at the door. I learned long ago that the cleanest chart can still hide a dirty night. What stayed with me was not the missing heart itself, It was the instinct to protect the institution before protecting the truth. Buildings cannot feel shame, so they borrow human voices to avoid it. I have heard those voices in conference rooms, elevators, and polished apologies. They always claim to be buying time, preserving order, preventing panic. But too often what they are really preserving is hierarchy. A patient can survive a failing organ. It is much harder to survive a system that teaches good people to hesitate when honesty becomes expensive. I still remember the way Tessa looked before she filed that report, like someone standing barefoot at the edge of winter water. There was no certainty in her, only resolve. Courage is rarely loud inside hospitals. It does not usually kick open doors or deliver speeches. More often it speaks softly, documents carefully, and accepts that truth may cost rent. Reputation, recommendations, maybe more. I have met brilliant surgeons and fearless paramedics, but that night one of the bravest people in the building was a young technician, with shaking hands and no real power, except the refusal to look away. General Cross visited months later, thinner, slower, carrying his new heartbeat with the cautious dignity of a man learning to live on borrowed grace. He shook my hand in the clinic hallway and thanked me for my honesty. I did not tell him how close we all came to failing him completely. Some truths heal. Others only reopen flesh that is barely sealed. But when he left, I sat alone for a while and listened to the vending machines hum and the distant wheels of a gurney rattling over a threshold. Hospitals never truly fall silent. They just change what they are confessing. I also thought about Claire, and about the sentence she threw like a blade through all our excuses. Her father had fought in wars with clearer rules than this building. She was right. In medicine, the enemy is supposed to be disease, injury, time. Yet some nights, the real enemy is cowardice dressed in professionalism. That is the scar cases like this leave behind. Not just grief, recognition, the understanding that competence without integrity is only a cleaner form of danger. I knew that before. After that night, I knew it in my bones. So when younger doctors ask me what experience teaches, I do not talk first about rare diagnoses or textbook saves. I tell them this: every hospital has two pulse lines. One runs through the patients, the other runs through the truth. The moment you let either one flatline for the sake of comfort, status, or fear, everything else you know becomes decoration. I'm Dr. Elliott Harris, and after all these years, I still believe medicine is at its most human when someone decides that honesty matters, even when it arrives too late to be painless.